Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Tommy Johnson. I'm with the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to IT Basics for Business. This is a newer quarterly breakfast seminar series, which provides a forum to gain useful, do-it-yourself IT solutions and insightful, actionable tips. And I want to thank Uprise partners again for allowing us to bring you this virtual event series for the entire season. I'd like to welcome you all to this second installment of IT Basics for Business for the calendar 2022-23. This is a four-part bi-monthly season-long series that runs through June. Now, today's topic, making sense of the buzz around cybersecurity, is presented by Brian Gagnon, Chief Technology Officer at Uprise Partners. They are a Maine-based technology company building value for small and medium-sized businesses through exceptional IT, software engineering, marketing, and other. Their vision is for companies of every size and every industry to be able to focus on the work they do, create, innovate, and grow, bolstered by seamlessly functioning systems and applications. Now, like all Chamber virtual signature events, today's presentation is free and it will be recorded and made available for replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, please visit our website, portlandregion.com, check out our events page, and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Now, before we get to today's presentation, I'm proud to share that we're using a newer platform that some of you may have experienced. It's called StreamYard, and we're using these for all of our virtual events. This platform provides many improved production and interaction elements, which I think you'll really be happy to see. I'd also like to remind you that if you have questions for our presenter, please type them in the YouTube chat, and they'll be relayed to Brian throughout the presentation. We'll also save a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A as we finish the event. Now, at this point, I'd like to acknowledge our presenting sponsor of IT Basics for Business, Uprise Partners. Since joining the Chamber a little over a year or so ago, Uprise Partners has been an active participant at many Chamber events and is one of our newer partners for this signature event series. They'll be the sole sponsor of this series and the content facilitator as well for the entire season. Now I'd like to invite Chief Executive Officer Melinda Gagnon to say a few words.
Good morning, Tommy. Good morning, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. We're glad to be with you. Want to just give a quick introduction of Uprise. We're a cybersecurity and IT managed services provider. We're based right here in Maine. We have customers across the U.S. And fortunately, for the past 2 years, we've been named one of the top 100 security firms in North America and one of the top 500 MSPs in North America. We love what we do. If you want to learn more about us, you can visit us at uprisepartners.com. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian and we can have a chat about cybersecurity.
Nice. Well, good morning, everybody. And actually, I'm just waiting for there we go. Good morning, everybody, and happy Valentine's Day. So today we're going to be talking about and demystifying cybersecurity. I know we've all heard the buzzwords. We've all heard a lot about it in the last number of years. But what I thought would be helpful is really breaking this down. So if you're an IT professional, an IT geek, someone that likes to dabble, play with things and, just try things with technology, I'm going to probably not be talking your language today. I want to be talking business language and what you need to think about if you're running a business in plain old words that you should care about. Leave the IT stuff to somebody else. That will be a different conversation for a different webinar. But let's dig in and get started. So last time for the last presentation, and if you haven't seen that, that is available for reference, but we talked about sort of these four essentials, right? Security, resiliency, experience, and productivity. And that's sort of the diamond, right, of things that a business needs to really run well. And so today we're going to focus on security and we're going to dig in a little deeper than we did the last time. But let's dig in, right? And so love is being safe and secure, right? That's a nice feeling that we all get. It's the box of chocolates, it's the flowers, it's all that stuff. But it relates to cybersecurity and making sure that we're safe and secure. As a business owner, that's like a box of chocolates for me. And I've had too many boxes of chocolates in my life, so we're working back from that. But when we think about it, and I've used this slide so many times at this point, but it really hits home, right? And the key is there are 35 million businesses that are small to medium-sized businesses. That's the vast majority of businesses in the United States. When we look at these statistics, a big percentage of those hit small businesses. So one thing I hear an awful lot, look, we're small, we're here in Maine, nobody's going to really, touch us and affect us, or we don't have data that anybody cares about. Why would they even mess with us, or what have you? They don't care. The hackers, they're in some foreign country. They have no idea what your business does, is, or whatever. It's just not that personal. They are just breaking in to see if they can, and see if they can somehow lock up your data, delete it, or cause you havoc. But at the end of the day, they're after money, right? So that is something that's changed quite significantly in the last, let's say, 5 years, where things went from being, let's just cause problems and be annoying, to let's actually extract some money from this. And they're really been quite good at it. I've seen things that $2 to $4 billion a year get transferred in, ransomware payments alone, right? That's a significant amount of money. So we have to pay attention to this. You have to pay attention to this. So no matter what size business you are, we all need to be paying attention to this, and personal data too. So I put together, and if you left right now and said, hey, this is boring, I'm going to catch up on this later, these are the 5 questions, right? And we're going to dig into these in more detail, but I wanted to go through these real quick, right? Cybersecurity is pretty simple from the business side, right? We want to make sure we know what we've got. We want to make sure we know who has access to it, where it's accessed, how it's accessed. Does your team know how to prevent outside forces from getting in that aren't doing the right things, right? Spoofing somebody, asking for you to change your bank account or something. Does your team and yourself, do you know how to spot that? And it's getting better and better every day. Unfortunately, you just can't go off of, well, they didn't spell something right. That's something, but there's a lot more to it. And then most importantly, what happens when there's a breach, right? I say when, it's really important. There's not a security professional in the world that would tell you there's such a thing as 100% security. So we have to think like something bad could happen. And this actually will get into a little bit more in some of these other questions, because making sure you're not holding on to too much is an important factor. So let's dig in. So what do you have, right? Everybody wants to say PII or credit card info or whatever. That's a small piece, right? And so if we think about what do you have as data, this is an important question that you as a business owner or somebody in a business really needs to think about, right? This is the story of too much or too little. If you know that you have intellectual property, maybe it's drawings, or maybe it's architectural diagrams or something like that, and that's something that you're going to use over the life of your business, that's intellectual property. And that might be something you want to keep for a very long time, because it gives you that business advantage, right? Understood. But we don't probably need to store customer data that are no longer customers anymore, and we're 20 years into saving data and you just have stuff from the beginning of time, right? That's a risk. That actually becomes a risk when it doesn't have business value anymore. And what I would tell you is, if you go out and look at just what storage prices are, right? Many CEOs, many business owners are now starting to realize, wow, storing data in the cloud is actually quite expensive when you start making sure it's backed up, that it's recoverable, that it's searchable, and all those things. So a gigabyte of data might be a penny, right? A penny a month. But when you look at what the total cost is to make sure it's backed up, make sure that it's resilient, and all of those things, that cost is many times that to make it recoverable. So yet another reason we want to make sure we know what we have and how long we need to store it. Email information. A lot of businesses run out of email. A lot of stuff is stored in email. What I would say is we are now starting to see cases, actual court cases, where people have stored so much information, it ends up getting discovered, and it costs a lot of money because you can't say we have a retention plan that stores people's stuff for 3 years or 5 years or whatever, and then we have a data destruction plan, right? So now all of a sudden it becomes discovery, and now you have to defend it and do all of that, and that gets really expensive. So just things to think about. Not all data needs to be stored forever. Not all data has the same value over time, and not all data needs to have the same level of like care and feeding, and it can become a risk in this day and age. So get rid of what you don't need. If you're not sure how long you need to retain financial data, talk to your accountant. If you don't know how long you need to keep something for legal purposes, obviously talk to your accountant. So, and if we talk about PII, right, I kind of started there. PII is a lot of things to a lot of people. And what I would say is, this is the definition. I'm not going to read it because that's boring and yucky. But if you think about it really simply, you need a couple pieces of information. It's not just an email address. Pardon me. It's not just an email address. It's actually an email address plus maybe a birthday or maiden name or something like that. And so what I would say to think about, general rule of thumb, read this definition though, is if these are questions that are asked of you to reset your password or to create an account somewhere, that starts to become PII. If I have someone's maiden name, their email address, chances are I could probably reset the password. Now all I have to do is somehow get into your email, right? Think about it that way. So that is dangerous. Anything that you could use to really identify somebody, also PII. We need to keep that safe and secure. The more points of data that a hacker has or that gets out into the wild in a breach, the more at risk you are from potential lawsuits and having to do much more costly mitigation. That's why that $9.5 million number is real. It's not because, hey, you didn't have a firewall and now we had to put a $500 or $3,000 firewall in place and now everything's good. It's not that simple. Maine has a law that requires you to alert people when there's a problem. So let's talk through a couple key takeaways in case if I put you to sleep already. So do an audit. You need to know what you have for data. Pretty easy. Shouldn't be too technical. Look everywhere. If you used Dropbox in the past or you used something else, things that are on your phone, maybe on your employees' phones, computers, laptops, old ones that are sitting in the corner. All of that stuff has data that could put you at risk in some way, shape, or form. So if we think of cybersecurity as you have valuable data that you need to protect, it's a better way to think about it because it is centric on what somebody is probably either going to try to steal from you, ruin for you, or, just make your life miserable with by putting it out there. So think about it that way. Create a data retention policy. Now, once you have the audit and you know all the pieces of data that you have, start to categorize it, right? And say something like financial data, we need to save that for 7 years. And email, we're going to save for 3 years. And IP, we're going to save for however long it's useful to you, right? Maybe 20 years, right? And then everything else, if it hasn't gotten touched after 3 years, it gets archived, and then after 3 more years, it gets purged, right? That's a retention policy. really great place to start. Doesn't include technology. What I would say, make a data retention policy, then talk to technology people, because they will help you figure out how to do exactly what you're requesting. Delete stuff. If you have PII that's no longer needed, have a policy. If you have customers that are no longer customers, or if you are saving credit card information, probably you want to make sure you're following PCI compliance, right? But just, you've got to have a plan for that stuff. Same with making sure that you understand, is it securely stored, right? My general rule of thumb, if you're going through this exercise, is when you get to this point, if you're not sure if it's securely stored, mark it down as not securely stored. It is super easy for a technologist to follow up and have a great list of what you think is not secured, to only say, no, that's absolutely secure, and here's how, right? That's so much easier. We're in a really great place. We'd rather know about what you think is not secure, because it actually helps us narrow down where to concentrate. And so now if we think about the next step, right, this is where things over the last 3 years have started to get a lot more hazy, right? Which is, how do you get to your information, right? So securing stuff's pretty easy if it's in a filing cabinet at the office and it's got PII and all that stuff. But in the world we live, that's less and less the case. We've got people working at a Starbucks. We've got somebody working on their phone, maybe on vacation in Mexico, and maybe from their house on a network that maybe is set up well, maybe not, and the office and everywhere in between. So what I would say is, knowing is half the battle. If you think about what your risk looks like, you want to know where all of those points of entry are. So again, really easy to make a list, right? Do people use this from their phones? Do people have laptops that they use? Do you have any old laptops that might have information on it? Do you get there from the web, right? Do you have people that connect from unknown networks? An unknown network is anything you don't manage. So that is the Starbucks, the hotel lobby, somebody's home, all of those things, right? So we want to know, and those are questions that we're going to ask. That's stuff that you could do all by yourself. Put it in an Excel and just keep track of where those places are. It becomes infinitely easier to make sure we don't miss something when we start building a security plan and applying technology to that. Next, absolutely, MFA, multi-factor authentication, works. Probably 85% of attacks, and I'm just guesstimating, that number changes by the month, but let's just say 85% for conversation purposes of attacks come through brute force, meaning they are just hammering away at your email or your credentials from somewhere. They don't care. They're not trying the passwords. It's just a script that's running and they're trying to get in. That is the vast majority of how vulnerabilities are found and broken into, right? So use MFA. It works. It prevents attacks. You should use it with anything that you've got that offers MFA. If it doesn't offer MFA, what I would say, maybe look at other products for down the road. It matters, and it solves problems. And so if we dig into our key takeaways here, securing your network, big piece of it, making sure you have a firewall, making sure your wireless access isn't wide open to the world. That's not good. If you don't have a password on your Wi-Fi, excuse me, it means that anybody could get on your Wi-Fi network and sniff the traffic and most likely get into files and see what's going through the network. So put a password on your Wi-Fi for sure. Make people use company-owned devices every place you can. There's been a big movement around BYOD, bring your own device. It's kind of like unlimited vacation time. It sounds amazing at first when you roll it out, but BYOD has a lot of pitfalls. And it sounds like, hey, I don't have to buy somebody a phone anymore, or I don't need to get them a laptop. They're just going to use their own thing for my corporate, wares, right? But the reality of it is you're opening yourself up to a lot more risk. And while, yes, you might be saving a little bit of money, having some control over where people do the bulk of their work and having, I sleep better at night knowing that the devices that they use are secure. An example for us personally, we do bring your own device for phones. The reason for that is the data that we have on there, we can easily claw back and wipe. It's not stored on the device, anything that we allow. So that makes sense. So kind of the next piece to that is if you don't own the phone, there are ways to secure the apps that they might have access to. You could even maybe limit that to certain devices. There are more invasive but secure ways to do that with somebody's personal phone as well, to really lock it down. Talk to an IT professional about that, but know that a company-owned device is always the best in most cases. We see this a lot. Strong passwords, keeping them updated. What I would say, and there's a lot of debate on this, many people say change your passwords on a regular basis. There are some regulations or some regulatory controls that may require you to do this more or less. What my thought is, have a very long password, 20, 24, 26 characters. Make it a phrase. Make it something that you remember, that you don't write on a Post-it note. There are so many times I go into an office and I just do these spot checks, talking, usually start talking a little bit about security. And then I usually make a joke about, yeah, and like one of the worst offenders is when you lift up a keyboard like this. And 9 times out of 10, I do that. There is Post-its under there with passwords on it. It's kind of embarrassing, but it just makes a good point. And so if you've got passwords around your monitor screen, under your keyboard, wherever, a good savvy hacker that actually really wants to inflict harm on you is going to be the person that comes and visits your office and puts in that time, right? That's going to be the person you absolutely don't want to have the passwords to anything. And also internal employees, you don't want to be sharing passwords. You don't want to be letting other people see or have your password, no matter how nice, trustworthy, and a great worker they are. Just don't do it, right? We want to have some accountability if there's a problem. And so, and lastly, MFA, not going to beat the drum on that, but just use it, right? I know we run into a lot of customers that say, this is a little bit of a pain and what have you, getting this implemented. Now I've got to peek at my phone or whatever. What I would say is that very minor inconvenience, which we try to minimize, most IT professionals try to minimize that, but it is way less costly and way less time consuming than getting ransomware or getting attacked. We're now talking potentially thousands of hours to get back from that for a mere 15 seconds of inconvenience. So there are some places where, as an IT professional, I will say, unfortunately, you got to just sort of suck it up. That's one of the very few places where I will say, suck it up. So, with that being said, let's talk about who has access. Again, really important. Just like we don't need to store all data for all things, we don't need everybody to have the same level of access, right? So we want to keep that list short. I call it, least privilege. You want to take an approach for everything of least privilege. You don't need to give the car keys to the person in your organization that's never going in the field, right? You just give that to the person that has that. Well, same with data. If you have financial data, not everybody probably needs access to that. If you have PII, that's a shorter list of people that might deal with that. If you have sales data, that might only need to be seen by the sales leader, right? Or maybe the executive staff. Point is, know who has access, Make sure that you look at it regularly, because we see that a lot, and make sure that you update it, right? We see so many times where people have left a company and they don't actually know who still has access. And then we ask, because we're doing an audit, and we say, hey, who is Joey Smith? And they're like, oh man, Joey left us like 4 years ago. Well, he still has an account, right? And he still has data in his account. What do you want us to do with that? Oh, we didn't know that, right? So we want to try to avoid that. And that is not like a technology thing. That's just a good data cleanliness thing that any business leader should be at the top of their list, right? And so if we think about that, making sure you have appropriate permissions and settings. One thing I like to say is, if you think of roles in your company, making groups that match those roles up, right? If you've got a bunch of accountants, that's the financial team, or that's the accounting team. You want to make a group that probably maps to the functions of that, so that you're just not giving out too much privilege, right? And so that's called roles-based access controls. Really important thing to think about, and it's easy. So from a business perspective, if you gave me a list of, here are all the roles in our company and we'd like groups that are associated with this, really easy to go and create those roles for starters, and then to start to apply security settings around that, so that we can make sure that people have the right amount of access. So good Goldilocks story there. Getting to the point of deactivating accounts, onboarding and offboarding are really key. Having a good onboarding and offboarding plan helps with a lot of this, because it helps you deactivate accounts. Colonial Pipeline, which shut down gasoline supplies in the whole East Coast for a number of time, we helped a little bit on the back end with that. But what I would say is, that was a disaster that could have been completely avoided. They didn't disable a number of accounts that had been out there for a long time. Those accounts got hacked into. When you hack into an account that nobody is actively using, it's like a free-for-all. Nobody is looking at that. Nobody sees anything funny. It becomes really easy to sort of be a launching pad. And that's what it becomes a lot of times. So, have a good offboarding plan. Something that we always work with our customers on is automating that and getting it as tight as possible. It matters. And so we've talked about the who, what, where. Well, now we're going to talk about the where. But, where is your information stored? That's important. We talked about where people are getting access from and who's getting access. But where are they getting access to? Is it in the cloud? Is it in, software as a service, or software as a savior, as I like to call it? Software that's out there. That's stuff that you need to know. Make a list of where all your important data is, even if it's not inside your four walls, because that's important to all of the other steps in how we would secure that. So, I think that's important. Cloud is great, but you still have to do all of the same security controls, whether it's in the cloud or whether it's behind your firewall at the office. It doesn't magically get easier because it's in the cloud. Still have to take the same steps. A lot of the same costs also exist. It's not magic. The cloud doesn't make, costs magically go away. In many cases, there are some places that it does. But just think about it in that sense, because it's really important to know how people are getting there and where they're getting. So, if we talk through the key takeaways, again, have a security stance for the cloud. Have one for your office. If you have VPN that maybe somebody set up over the last 3 years because a bunch of people decided, hey, it's cool to work from home. Nobody decided that, by the way. But it is kind of cool sometimes. But with that being said, take a look at that. The VPN, number one way in behind your firewall, unaided. If it's not set up correctly, it's basically like somebody's device from home or wherever has unfettered access past a bunch of security if you don't have it set up correctly. If you're not sure if you have VPN, if it's set up correctly, happy to help, right? Hit us at the end of this. My information's in there, but we see that quite a bit. It's a really big, good functional thing, but also a big weakness potentially if it's not set up correctly. This is the little stuff, the clean desk, right? The clean whiteboard. Have a clean desk and a clean whiteboard policy, right? Put it in your handbook. Make sure people see it when they come on board, and make sure people follow it. Walk around and think to yourself, where do people have access from the outside where they might see something proprietary? It doesn't have to be data that's stored in the cloud or somewhere else. Data could also be, interesting to somebody if they're a guest in your organization. I always look at whiteboards as I'm walking by, not because I'm trying to spy on somebody. I want to see actually what did they leave on there so that I can tell them, hey, you know what? Really interesting. I saw half of your top prospects list on that whiteboard back there. Who else comes in here? I'm trustworthy. I don't care. I'm not in your industry, but I'm guessing somebody might come through that may pass that information along. And that's when people start maybe thinking a little bit different, but make sure that you keep stuff cleaned up. Filing cabinets are still a thing. If you have to keep paper copies of things, if you print things, making sure that, your recycling bin is either shredded or that it's just completely non-important information matters. People still do those old things. And in fact, 3-letter agencies like the CIA and things like that, they do a great job dumpster diving to get passwords and important information. It's still a thing. It's a way to collect information, and it's really easy because a lot of people just think, who's going to, dig through my trash for that? People do. So just think about it. The Post-its thing, it's a pet peeve of mine, but, look for stuff like that. Look at your employees and coworkers and whatever. There are a lot of great password tools out there that can help you store passwords. I will actually, this is where I'll talk about one technology by name that if you have, you really need to probably talk to somebody or do a little research. LastPass. I know a lot of people have had LastPass. We used LastPass as a company. Couple things with LastPass as a security professional that rubbed me the wrong way. One, they weren't forthcoming with the fact they had a major data breach. They weren't forthcoming with what the data breach meant to all of us. And they weren't honest about the timelines that happened, and that is tough, right? And again, I'm reporting news that I got from the news. I wasn't inside that company or party to any of the things behind the scenes. So I will say allegedly, but I'm going to go with, if that's what they sort of shared, that's probably what happened. So what I would say is, this actually goes into sort of my next area of topic, right? Communicating that something happened is really important in saving any trust that you may hope to have after a breach. The better you do at communicating and what exactly happened, what you're doing to fix it, and all that makes a big difference. If you have LastPass, you need to seriously consider getting those passwords out of there, because at some point, somebody has access to all of those passwords. It's going to take quite a while for them to crack through them, for people that have, harder to guess passwords. But it is a risk that is unmitigated. There's no way to take it back. They have all the data. And so we moved off of LastPass. There's plenty of other options. Take it seriously, though. And if you want more information, hit me up afterwards. Happy to provide it. But I just want to alert folks of that. That's a pretty big what happened there, right? And so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the personal piece, right? 80-90% of attacks are personal, right? They're social engineering, where they send you a message. They're trying to get you to get tricked into, hey, this is the Microsoft site. You're going to need to change your password. Here are the links, whatever. Making sure your team knows, and actually, by the way, I realized I put down the stat. It's 95%, not 80 or 90, but we'll go with that, right? So a lot. That's anything over like 50% for me is a lot. But so if we think about that, we want to make sure our team knows, listen, if you're skeptical about something, if something looks off, if the fonts look off, or there's typos, or the link doesn't match up, always check the link no matter what it says. If you mouse over it, it will usually like give you where the link is actually going. Making sure that your teams and yourself think like that and have a little bit of skeptical eye on emails specifically, but also, you could see this stuff potentially from a guest in Teams or Zoom. Double check and scrutinize everything. Also, have multiple factors, right? When you're dealing with higher value risk. If somebody is sending me a message saying they want to change the bank account that we have to submit to or what have you, that automatically, for us, signals that we need more than one point of verification. So don't call the number in the email. Don't call the number in that. They will spoof that and make it sound exactly like where you're calling. Go and find out, and have your key vendors have their phone numbers written down, right? Have a list in Excel with all of those, because just imagine if they were able to somehow hack in, reroute, JP Morgan's website to their website for a period of time before they get caught, and then put their own call center numbers in there, right? So that's what we try to do. We try to keep, statements that we can look at, and that's where we get the phone number, right? Do that. If there is something like that for a financial perspective, have another person in your team verify it and go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that, you're not missing something. It's okay. Yes, it adds a little bit of time, but you know what else adds time? Tracking down where you just accidentally sent a bunch of money, only to find out you have to send it again because the payee didn't get it. So think about that. Making sure that you do regular testing with your teams as well. Really important. There's some great tools out there. We utilize a bunch of those to send out test messages. We're basically trying to trick people, because it's a heck of a lot easier if we trick you and then send you just some great training to sort of up your skills than for somebody else to find you and have their way with your data or your finances. So equally important. Again, really quick, this is a nice cheat sheet. Look at send from, make sure that matches up. If you see some weird email address, it's weird, flag it, highlight it. When you find that you have a problem, if you have IT professionals, take a screenshot of it and send us the screenshot. We don't want to get infected either. We want to lower the chances that somebody accidentally clicks on something. This stuff is starting to look really good, really authentic. Somehow they're maybe using Grammarly now, because Grammarly seems so much, the grammar seems so much better. Same with the spelling, and again, make sure you've got some different financial controls that are more than just reading an email and clicking on. So number of things there. Internal emails, things from, I call them VIPs, but things from the executives in the company. Making sure you have some settings that try to, prevent spoofing from them, blocking addresses that maybe have parts of their name in it from outside. These are other ways to think about as you get into a bigger organization to prevent bad things from happening and making it look like, I got an email from Melinda and she told me to make this change and make an account with a certain password. I'm going to probably take a few minutes and call, or I'm going to walk by and ask the question. If it sounds fishy, if it sounds like elevation of privileges, elevation, anything with finance, take the extra time and just reach out and call. So now we get to the part that a lot of people sort of skip and think, oh, well, that's fine. We'll deal with that when the time comes. Being through a bunch of these for customers that had already been attacked, what I would say is it is chaotic, even for the best planning, right? There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces. We are trying to secure things. We are trying to do any type of forensics that we can to try to track down the who, the where, the how, and all of that. And then making sure that we remediate things, fix things, and more importantly, patch however they got in, right? That's a lot. On top of that, there are state requirements in Maine, as well as many states at this point, that you have to alert people that are affected by a data breach, right? So that's not something you want to be coming up with for a plan while you're doing all of the other pieces, right? And dealing with insurance and dealing with all that. Highly, highly recommend to build a cyber resiliency plan. It's going to help you. It is sort of that checklist, right? When the engine falls off the plane, the pilots aren't like, ad-libbing how they're going to like deal with that, right? They go to checklists and they do it for a reason. That's what we need to do as well as business owners. And, we just need to do it. It's going to make us a lot more resilient. We'll be able to move quickly through it. That is stuff we help with all the time for all of our customers. We start to get, the basics of that in place. Having an attorney that knows how to deal with this stuff on retainer, having, financial people that can help recreate things. These are things that you want to sort of have in your pocket or know somebody that does. So, other pieces to this, right? Making sure your backups are tested. So many times we take over for someone and we're doing their backups and we look at their old backups and find out they never actually worked or they didn't have valued and valuable backups, right? That's stuff that make sure that your backups are getting tested. We actually have a legal customer that a week ago, we had asked them, hey, what's the backup plan with this cloud software? And they said, oh, they back it up every day. It's da-da-da-da-da. And I said, okay, great. I want to ask them for proof of that. And so it took us a little bit. We got in there. We asked the question. When we dug in and kept being persistent, we pretty quickly found that, oh, oops, actually, we haven't been backing you up for 7 years. 7 years. And we've been charging you, though. So they quickly refunded the money because I think they realized the jam they were in. But that's not good, right? And so we want to make sure that things are getting backed up and that it gets tested, right? At least once a year, but probably maybe a little more frequently than that, just to make sure that the backups are, working and that you test a random piece of data. So that's something that IT folks can help you with, but ask them for it, right? And then, ask to see it. Don't just take their word for it. Other pieces, like I said, breach notice, making sure you've got a plan of if something was to get out, how you're going to deal with it. The other piece of it is what I find is when you start thinking about things like this definitely could happen to the point where we need to create these documents and they sound kind of icky and ugly. I think sometimes it actually helps the wheels get turning on why the beginning of the presentation pieces are so important, right? So I think that's key. And, open it up to questions. This is great. Thank you very much for allowing me to do this. And so I'm going to look at the questions. Okay. So one question. LastPass. Who else do you recommend? There are a number of vendors out there that do it and do it well, do it differently. What I would say is from a LastPass replacement perspective, 1Password, great. Bitwarden, also great. Those are probably the two at the top of my list. There are others But I would say for a straight up LastPass replacement, those are both really good. Surprisingly, they have a really good and easy to follow migration plan. Like somebody in sales and marketing quickly figured out, how that competitor was going down the drain. So that's good. Vault Warden. There's a number of other ones out there. Happy to give you more detailed suggestions based on what you might need, but there's a lot. Luckily, there's a lot of good solutions, and I think that's about it of what I'm seeing for questions. If anybody has any others, I'll hang for a second. Let me just look. Okay. What's something a business in manufacturing engineering space may want to consider as it relates to security? What I would say probably the biggest that I've seen is that intellectual property piece. And it bleeds out, right? In that we have drawings, we have engineering diagrams, we have intellectual property that we pretty much need to keep forever, right? Or we have customers that we've got their design of something. The hardest place is when you want to keep something forever, to segment that and not keep everything forever. So I would say having a good tagging program so that you could tag different types of data and starting to segment what you keep forever and what you keep for a period of time, I think is really critical. There is a lot of good technology that can assist with that. Happy to help there as well and talk in more detail there. So that's what I have. If anybody has any additional questions, always happy to have you hit us up. I am Brian at uprisepartners.com. Super easy. But thank you very much, Portland Regional Chamber. This is a great opportunity, and hopefully people got stuff out of it. Oh, all right. Sounds like a lot of safety measures are also personnel based. How closely would you recommend IT work with HR? Absolutely critical. So if you think of personal information, HR, there's a ton of personal information, insurance information, private information, you name it. Don't want it getting out. Also, HR is the tip and the butt of the spear, unfortunately, or fortunately, but they know who's coming. They knew who's going. Having a great relationship with them and making sure that you have things as automated as possible. We work with customers to put an onboarding form together as well as an offboarding form. Making sure that HR is not letting you know last is really critical. So making sure HR really thinks about the technology, at least in terms of removing that access, really critical. There's some great tools, Gusto, for one, Paycom. There's a bunch that you can even take some of that information and at least get an email alert or something like that you can route to IT at a bare minimum. There's also ways that you could tie the software together so that you could start to automate this as well. So some of that just takes place, especially if somebody gets terminated, you could have that, do some actions for you. So that is absolutely critical. Yep. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, happy to conclude and have a good Valentine's Day. Don't eat chocolate. It's probably not good for you, but maybe have a little. Maybe have a little.
A little bit of chocolate's okay, right?
Little bit's okay.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, thanks again. Great presentation as always. And, I want to thank you and all the folks at Uprise Partner and also the Chamber staff for helping to produce this great event today. Again,
Absolutely.
another just plug for each of you for attending today and throughout the year. If you're interested in learning more about making sense of the buzz around cybersecurity, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with some links to additional resources. Again, another shout out to our sponsor and presenter, Uprise Partners, for their continued support of the IT Basics for Business series. We look forward to seeing you again this spring when we hear from Brian and his team on the next topic with regards to IT. The IT Basics for Business series is typically held on the first or second Tuesday every other month, going right through June. at 8 a.m. in the morning. So with that, have a wonderful rest of your day, stay warm, and enjoy the week.